In the late 1980s, the world of music felt like it was spinning faster every year. Everywhere people went, record stores, radio stations, cafes, and concert halls, one question kept floating in the air. Who ruled the music world? Some said Michael Jackson, the master of dance and smooth vocals. Others argued that Prince, the fearless creator with a guitar that seemed alive in his hands, was unmatched. Fans compared them, magazines compared them, and even people who didn't usually listen to pop music had an opinion. Yet neither Michael nor Prince ever spoke against the other. They kept their thoughts private, leaving the world to guess what they really felt. This guessing created a kind of invisible line between the two stars, a line made of respect, admiration, and a silent competition that neither of them had planned. People loved imagining what might happen if they ever stood on the same stage, but no one believed it would actually occur. Their styles were different, their personalities were different, and their paths rarely crossed. But that only made the idea more exciting. It was like imagining two superheroes meeting in one place. You didn't expect it to happen, but you still hoped it would. By 1988, Michael Jackson's Bad World Tour was one of the biggest events on the planet. Tickets sold out faster than anyone expected. Stadiums in every country filled to the top, with fans waving signs, wearing glittering jackets, and practicing their favorite dance moves. Michael's shows were known for their precision, every light, every step, every sound timed perfectly. People walked into his concerts expecting magic, and somehow, he delivered it again and again. Prince, however, followed a different road. He preferred surprise, mystery, and spontaneity. His concerts changed from night to night. He could turn a quiet moment into a wild guitar solo or transform a simple beat into a long, unforgettable jam. No one ever knew what he would do next, and that was exactly why fans adored him. His creativity felt endless. Even though their styles were different, the two artists kept an eye on each other's careers. Prince had seen videos of Michael moonwalking across a stage with a precision that looked unreal. Michael had listened to Prince's albums, amazed by how one person could play so many instruments and break so many musical rules at once. Neither ever admitted to feeling challenged, but deep inside, each understood that the other represented a high bar, a reminder to never stop improving. As the Bad Tour grew bigger, rumors began to spread. Some fans claimed they had spotted Prince in the crowd at a few shows. Others said he had been testing out new ideas after watching Michael perform. Whether these stories were true or not didn't matter. The world believed them. Every time Michael walked on stage, people wondered if tonight would be the night Prince made a surprise appearance. Journalists wrote articles. Talk shows brought it up. It became a conversation that never ended. Michael remained calm about the talk. He focused on rehearsals, keeping his team sharp, checking the sound, the costumes, and every detail. But even he couldn't ignore the whispers. Each time someone told him Prince might be in the audience, he simply smiled, a quiet, thoughtful smile that no one could read. Was he excited? Nervous? Curious? No one knew. Prince, too, heard all the noise. Friends and musicians around him teased him about showing up at a concert. Some encouraged him, saying the world would love it. Others warned him, saying the expectations were too high. Prince just shook his head and laughed, keeping his true thoughts hidden. But something about the idea stayed with him. It was not competition he felt. It was a pull, a strong feeling that something extraordinary could happen if the two of them ever shared the same space. Behind all the rumors, there was also a shared history most people didn't fully understand. Michael and Prince had almost worked together once, back when Michael was preparing the song Bad. The original plan included a duet, but it never happened. Their creative visions didn't line up, and the idea was left behind, buried in time. Fans wondered about it for years. What would that duet have sounded like? Was the world robbed of something historic? Questions like that floated around constantly. As months passed, a quiet expectation built up around the tour. Every time Michael arrived in a new city, fans scanned the crowds, hoping to catch sight of Prince. Every time Prince performed his own shows, people shouted song requests that hinted at Michael. The two stars became part of a larger story that the public was writing in their minds, a story where their talents eventually crossed like two bright comets in the night sky. What most people didn't know was that both men were feeling the weight of fame in their own ways. Michael's schedule was tight, and the pressure to deliver perfection every night was intense. He carried the responsibility of millions of fans who believed in his magic. Prince, on the other hand, often questioned how much he should give to the public and how much he should keep for himself. He loved creating freely, without limits, without expectations, without anyone trying to define him. This contrast only added to the invisible tension between them, the kind of tension made not of conflict, but of two powerful spirits moving in the same era. Each pushed the other forward without ever needing to meet face to face. It was a strange relationship, one built on admiration and distance at the same time. Everything changed in the summer of 1988. As Michael's tour reached London, the energy around it was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. Wembley Stadium was set for several nights of shows, each expected to sell more than 100,000 tickets. The city buzzed with excitement. Tour buses drove around with posters. Radio stations played Michael's songs on a loop. Businesses even decorated storefronts with sequined gloves and fedora hats. Prince was also in London at the time, working quietly on new music. The two artists were closer, physically, than they had been in years. And as often happens in life, strange timing created an opportunity that no one could have predicted. Prince heard from a mutual industry friend that Michael was in the middle of rehearsing for the first Wembley show. For reasons he couldn't fully explain, this sparked something in him. He felt a sudden curiosity, a spark of inspiration that told him to go see the atmosphere for himself. This moment, this tiny choice, became the start of one of the most surprising nights in music history. Prince decided to visit the stadium quietly, without any announcement or major intention. He wasn't planning anything big. He simply wanted to see, observe, feel the energy. But when someone of his presence walks into a space, even silently, the atmosphere shifts. As soon as he stepped backstage, people froze. Crew members whispered. Some just stared, unsure if they were dreaming. News reached Michael within minutes, carried through the hallways by excited staff members. "Prince is here," someone told him. At first, Michael thought it was a joke, but when he realized it was true, he paused mid-step. This wasn't a rivalry moment. This wasn't even a challenge. It was something unexpected, something unpredictable, something exciting. The quiet line between them, built over years of comparisons and rumors, was finally about to be crossed, not in conflict, but in curiosity. Two legends were now in the same place, at the same time, during one of the biggest tours in the world. And although no one knew it yet, a single question was about to open the door to a night people would talk about for decades. The news that Prince had entered the backstage area spread with surprising speed. Crew members who usually focused on cables, lighting, and stage equipment suddenly found themselves whispering like excited schoolchildren. For most people, seeing one music legend in a lifetime was rare enough. Seeing two of them in the same hallway on the same night felt almost unreal. Some of the staff tried to act calm, but their wide eyes and quick breaths made it clear that something unusual was unfolding. Prince walked with his usual quiet confidence. He didn't push past anyone or demand attention. He simply moved with a calm, smooth rhythm, as if every step was part of a silent melody only he could hear. He wore a long, dark coat, stylish but understated, the kind of outfit that only he could pull off without saying a word. Lights reflected softly off his rings as he passed by groups of stunned crew members. He wasn't smiling, but he wasn't serious either. His expression was calm, curious, observant. He looked around as if he were receiving the atmosphere rather than judging it. The backstage buzz of voices, the shuffle of feet, and the distant echoes of musicians rehearsing created a strange harmony behind him. When the news reached Michael Jackson, he was warming up with a few dancers in a private rehearsal room. He had been practicing footwork, the kind that required so much precision that even a small slip could throw off the entire flow. But when someone knocked and said, "Michael, Prince is here," his focus stopped instantly. Michael blinked and looked at the door. For a moment he wondered if he had misheard. "Prince? Prince? Who?" he asked softly, even though deep down he knew exactly who they meant. "Prince," the crew member repeated, as if saying it again would help him understand. "He's here, backstage." Michael stood still, letting the words settle. He had imagined meeting Prince many times, but always in a calm, planned way. Maybe at a studio, a quiet restaurant, or a small private event with only a few trusted people. Never backstage during one of the biggest shows of his life. Never right before he was supposed to face a stadium full of cheering fans. There was confusion at first. Not fear, not worry, just the surprise of a moment that felt too big, too sudden, too unexpected. He wiped his forehead with a towel and took a slow breath. The dancers around him exchanged uncertain glances. Everyone knew this was important. Everyone knew the energy of the night had shifted. "Where is he?" Michael finally asked. The staff member pointed down the hallway, nervous but excited. "He's near the stage entrance. He just walked in." Michael nodded, placed the towel aside, and stepped toward the door. His heart was beating a little faster than usual. Not out of nervousness, but out of anticipation. This was someone he admired. Someone who shaped music in his own powerful way. Meeting Prince wasn't like meeting another musician. It was like encountering someone from another artistic world. As Michael walked through the hallway, dancers, guitarists, and technicians stepped aside politely. His presence always carried a gentle quietness, and now the silence deepened as he approached. When he turned the corner, he saw Prince standing there, speaking to a guitarist who recognized him but tried very hard to appear relaxed. Prince turned slightly, sensing someone approaching. When he saw Michael, he gave a small smile, almost playful, almost thoughtful. Michael smiled too, sincerely, warmly. For a moment, the whole backstage area seemed to freeze. Even the distant sound of instruments being tested seemed to lower itself, as if giving space to the meeting happening right there. They stopped a few feet apart, two stars who had been compared for years finally standing face to face without cameras or reporters watching them. "Hey," Michael said softly, his voice gentle but full of meaning. "Hey," Prince said back, equally calm. There was no awkwardness, just a natural pause, like two currents of music blending slowly. Michael reached out his hand and Prince shook it firmly. Their handshake was strong yet respectful, filled with a sense of mutual admiration. "I hear your show tonight is huge," Prince said with a small grin, tilting his head slightly. Michael chuckled. "I hope so. Still working on a few things." Prince's eyes sparkled with quiet amusement. "Still working," he repeated. "That's what makes it great." Michael appreciated the line more than he could express. Praise from Prince was rare, and he knew it wasn't said casually. "So," Michael asked, "what brings you here tonight?" Prince shrugged slightly, his expression unreadable in the most interesting way. "Curiosity," he said simply. "I was in town. Thought I'd see how the magic happens." Michael smiled shyly but proudly. "There's a lot of magic here." "I know," Prince replied. "That's why I came." They stood together for a few seconds, two creative minds sharing a moment that didn't need long speeches or explanations. It was enough just to be there. Then, Prince took a small step closer, and lowered his voice, speaking in a tone that felt both playful and serious. "Mind if I join you tonight?" Michael blinked. He hadn't expected that. He wasn't even sure he heard correctly at first. "Join me?" he repeated. "On stage," Prince clarified. "If you're okay with it." Michael's breath caught. The idea struck him with a surprising burst of excitement. It felt like a spark lighting up inside him, but he also had to think carefully. His show was planned down to the second. Every step, every move, every spotlight was arranged. Adding something unexpected could easily throw things off. But this wasn't any random moment. And this wasn't any random performer. It was Prince. Michael looked into Prince's eyes and saw something real, something sincere, something bold. It wasn't a challenge. It wasn't an attempt to overshadow him. It wasn't even a competition. It was simply a creative spark, a spontaneous idea, a moment where art wanted to become bigger than planning and structure. "How?" Michael asked gently. Prince shrugged, his voice smooth. "However you want. Just a moment. A little surprise for the audience, a little fun for us." Michael slowly nodded. The idea was risky but exciting, and sometimes the greatest moments in life happen when you step into the unknown. "Okay," Michael said finally. "Let's do it." Prince grinned, a rare, genuine grin that transformed his face. "Good," he said simply. "Then let's make tonight unforgettable." They spoke quietly for a few more minutes, discussing nothing specific but sharing a sense of trust. Neither talked about the years of rumors or comparisons. Neither mentioned the missed duet years earlier. They didn't need to. All of that faded away, replaced by a sense of possibility. Around them, the staff whispered in disbelief. Something special was happening, something that felt bigger than the tour, bigger than the venue, bigger than the rivalry the world had built around them. As the final preparations for the show continued, Michael and Prince stepped apart for a moment, each heading to different corners of the backstage area. Michael went to his dressing room to change into his first costume. Prince moved closer to the stage, standing quietly in the shadows, studying the space he might soon walk onto. The crew felt the electricity in the air. Dancers felt it. Musicians felt it. Everyone felt it. A moment that had once existed only in dreams and whispers was now becoming real, with no warning, no announcement, and no plan except trust. The night was no longer just another concert. It had become unpredictable, thrilling, alive. And neither Michael nor Prince knew exactly how the moment would unfold. They only knew that the world would never forget what was about to happen. The stadium lights towered over Wembley like giant glowing crowns as thousands of fans poured into their seats. The evening sky was turning from soft blue to deep purple, creating the perfect backdrop for a night that would be remembered for decades. Excitement buzzed through the air like electricity. People waved handmade signs, wore shiny jackets, and practiced the famous spin and kick moves they hoped to see that night. Many had been waiting in line since sunrise, determined to get as close as possible to the stage. What none of them knew, what absolutely no one in the entire audience could guess, was that something extraordinary was about to unfold. A moment that no schedule listed, no poster advertised, and no reporter predicted. Even the loudest fans, those shouting at the top of their lungs, could never imagine that Prince was standing backstage, only a few steps from walking into the brightest lights in the world. Inside the stadium, the atmosphere grew heavier with anticipation. Conversations blended with laughter, cheers, and the muffled sound of music tests coming from behind the curtains. Parents told their children stories about Michael's earlier performances. Teenagers compared sequined outfits. Friends took photos on small film cameras, hoping to catch memories they would treasure for years. In the middle of all this excitement, Michael Jackson walked through the backstage hallway, adjusting the glove on his right hand while humming softly to himself. He felt the usual swirl of emotions, excitement, focus, and the quiet calm he always carried before stepping into an ocean of noise. But tonight, there was something extra in the air, a gentle tension that touched his heart like a whisper. Prince was somewhere close, and the thought pushed a new kind of energy through his veins. He checked on his dancers, gave a few last instructions, and smiled when he saw their eagerness. They didn't know the full plan yet, and Michael preferred it that way. Surprises, he believed, were best when they truly were surprises. A few steps away, Prince stood near the edge of the stage, mostly hidden by thick curtains. He leaned lightly on a large speaker, his hands resting on his guitar. Even though he had played for massive crowds many times, this moment felt different. He wasn't the main act tonight. He wasn't even announced. He was a guest, a shadow preparing to walk into the brightest moment of the night. Prince took in the sound of the roaring crowd. He listened carefully, letting their excitement settle into his mind. His calm expression didn't reveal much, but inside he felt a mixture of thrill and curiosity. What would happen when he stepped out there? What would Michael do? How would the audience react? He didn't fear these questions. Instead, he welcomed them. The unknown had always been the place where his creativity felt the most alive. From the curtain gap, he could see thousands of tiny lights flickering across the stadium, camera flashes, bracelets, glowing sticks. It looked like a universe of stars waiting for a miracle. As the concert time grew closer, the backstage area became a whirl of activity. Technicians rushed around checking microphones, tightening wires and adjusting lights. Dancers stretched their legs, warming up their bodies. Musicians tuned their instruments with a seriousness that matched the importance of the night. Yet even with all this movement, everyone kept one secret shared look, a silent expression that said, "Prince is here. This is not a normal show." A young stagehand carrying a stack of towels passed by Prince and nearly dropped everything when he recognized him. Prince gave him a small nod, and the boy froze for 3 full seconds, unsure if he should smile, speak, or simply keep walking. Eventually, he shuffled away, whispering to himself about the unbelievable moment he had just witnessed. Meanwhile, Michael stood in front of a long mirror in his dressing room. His costume glittered under the soft lights, reflecting tiny stars on the floor. He closed his eyes for a moment, breathed in deeply, and allowed the calm to settle over his body. He knew this night would be different. He could feel it, not in his mind, but in his spirit, in the quiet spark inside him that always awakened before something great. He opened his eyes, smiled at his reflection, and whispered softly, "Let's give them something they'll never forget." As showtime arrived, the stadium lights dimmed, and the entire crowd roared as if a wave of sound had crashed inside the building. The excitement was so loud that even backstage, people felt their chests vibrate. The ground almost trembled under the weight of their cheers. Michael walked toward the stage entrance, waving at the dancers as they took their positions. The opening music began, a deep beat followed by a rising melody. The crowd's roar grew so loud it felt like a living thing. Prince watched from the shadows as Michael stepped into the spotlight. The stage glowed as fireworks burst in the background. Michael moved smoothly across the platform, his voice steady, his energy powerful. Every dance step was sharp, every spin was perfect, and the audience responded with pure joy, singing every word louder than the speakers. Prince found himself tapping his fingers lightly on his guitar. Not from impatience, but from admiration. He had always respected Michael's ability to turn a stage into a world of its own. Tonight, that world stretched across 101,000 hearts. The show continued with hit after hit. The crowd danced, shouted, cried, and laughed. Some fans waved their arms in perfect rhythm. Others simply stood and watched in awe, not wanting to miss a single second. Backstage, Prince moved closer to the curtain again. The moment he had spoken about with Michael earlier was approaching. His heart beat slowly but strongly like a steady drum. He didn't feel nervous, but he felt alert, fully awake, fully present. Michael, meanwhile, performed with even more passion than usual. Knowing that Prince was watching him from a few feet away added an energy he didn't expect. It wasn't competition, it wasn't pressure, it was inspiration, the kind that makes you push harder, reach higher, and shine brighter. Finally, near the middle of the show, a quiet part of the music began, a soft pause in the set. Michael stepped forward, looking out at the ocean of people. His breathing slowed, and he held the microphone close. The stadium became silent in an instant. The air grew thick with suspense. Even those in the farthest seats could feel something unusual was coming. Michael looked at the crowd, then glanced to the side of the stage, where Prince waited in the shadows. "We've got a friend tonight," Michael said, his voice calm but filled with meaning. The crowd reacted with confusion first, a wave of murmurs rolling through the stadium. Friend? Who? Some fans looked at each other, puzzled, their faces glowing in the dim lights. A few shouted names, guessing, hoping, but the truth was beyond anything they could imagine. Behind the curtain, Prince adjusted the strap of his guitar, took a single step forward, and prepared for the moment he would walk into a dreamlike wave of sound and light. Michael raised his hand gently toward the side of the stage, a subtle invitation that only Prince could see clearly. And in that tiny, quiet moment, one heartbeat before something incredible, time seemed to pause. The fans didn't know it yet. The musicians didn't know it either. Only two people in the entire stadium understood what was about to unfold. And the next few seconds would change the history of live music forever. The stadium grew strangely quiet, not silent, but filled with a soft wave of whispers as Michael stood at the center of the stage. The crowd sensed something different, something they couldn't name yet. Michael looked toward the side of the stage, and the light followed his gaze like a curious spotlight searching for a secret. Then, slowly and calmly, Prince stepped out from behind the curtain. For a moment, Wembley Stadium froze. It was as if 101,000 hearts forgot how to beat. Even the wind seemed to pause in the open-air arena. Prince walked toward the center of the stage with effortless confidence, his guitar resting comfortably in his hands. He wasn't rushing, and he wasn't trying to shock anyone. He moved with the grace of someone who knew exactly who he was, someone who didn't need fanfare to create magic. Michael watched him approach with a small smile that held both excitement and gratitude. This was the moment they had spoken about backstage, the moment only the two of them had known was coming. Now it was real, and the world was seeing it unfold. As Prince reached Michael, the crowd exploded into cheers so loud that even the lights seemed to vibrate. People screamed his name, others simply shouted without words, unable to believe what they were seeing. Some fans covered their mouths, their eyes wide with disbelief. Cameras flashed like thousands of tiny stars hitting the stage. Michael extended his hand and Prince shook it warmly. The gesture was simple, but in that moment, it felt like history was being written. When two of the most admired artists on the planet acknowledged each other like that, in front of so many people, it felt like the whole world was witnessing something rare and unforgettable. Prince brought the microphone to his lips and said with a playful smile, "Mind if I borrow your stage for a moment?" The crowd cheered even louder, thrilled by his humor and confidence. Michael laughed softly. "It's all yours," he replied, stepping back half a step. But Prince didn't take the stage alone. Instead, he strummed a gentle chord on his guitar, a warm, smooth sound that flowed across the stadium like the opening line of a beautiful conversation. Michael recognized the tune almost instantly and nodded as if saying, "Okay, let's make this moment special." Prince stepped a little closer to Michael and played a short riff, one filled with personality, sharp, stylish, and full of flair. It wasn't a challenge in a negative sense. It was more like saying, "Show me what you've got." Michael understood right away. He responded not with a guitar, but with motion. He slid one foot forward, tapped the ground lightly, and spun smoothly, landing with the confidence only he had. The crowd screamed again, delighted by the silent call and response happening between them. Prince raised an eyebrow and played a longer riff, adding a playful twist at the end. Michael answered with a sharper movement, 2 quick steps, a lean, and a snap. The energy between them sparkled like bright electricity. It was not a competition. It was not a battle. It was a creative conversation between two artists expressing themselves in the ways they knew best. Prince with his guitar, Michael with his dance. Prince took a few steps across the stage, swinging his guitar gently as he played a new line of notes. Michael followed behind him, moving to the rhythm, letting his steps blend perfectly with the music. They weren't rehearsed, but they were somehow perfectly in sync, as if they had been performing together for years. The band, confused for a moment, quickly adjusted. The musicians listened closely to Prince's chords and shifted the beat to support him. The drums softened, the bass adjusted, and the keyboard found a gentle tone that wrapped around his melody. The background singers exchanged excited looks. They knew this was something they might never experience again. Prince stopped playing for a moment, nodded at the band, and struck a bold chord that signaled something bigger was coming. Michael felt the shift instantly. He stepped forward, ready for whatever Prince had in mind. Prince began a funky rhythm, strong and lively, filling the stadium with a bright, joyful sound, the kind of sound that made people move without even realizing it. Michael answered by dancing with more energy, his feet tapping rapidly, his arms smooth and flowing, his body moving like it was powered by the music itself. The audience reacted as if waves of excitement were rolling through them. People jumped up and down, waved their arms, and shouted like they were part of the show. Some were laughing from pure happiness. Others wiped tears from their eyes because they understood they were watching a moment that came once in a lifetime. Michael moved closer to Prince and playfully circled him, matching the rhythm of the guitar. Prince laughed, a genuine warm laugh that reached even the farthest seats. He shifted into a high-energy guitar solo, his fingers gliding across the strings with breathtaking ease. Michael, never one to fall behind, took center stage and performed one of his signature spins, fast, smooth, and perfectly controlled. The spin ended with him landing exactly on beat with Prince's final note. The stadium erupted. Prince nodded with a proud smile as if saying, "Well done." Michael nodded back as if replying, "Your turn." They stood side by side now, the crowd roaring so loudly it almost felt like the earth was shaking. For a few seconds, they simply enjoyed the moment, smiling at each other and at the thousands of fans who couldn't stop cheering. Then Prince leaned toward Michael and whispered something only he could hear. Michael nodded and took the microphone. With a warm smile, Michael began singing a familiar line from one of his songs, soft at first, then stronger as the band followed his lead. But this time, Prince added gentle guitar harmonies that made the song feel fresh and new. It wasn't the full track, just a short version, a sample, a shared moment. Prince stepped up beside him and sang a brief harmony, blending his voice with Michael's in a way that felt natural and surprisingly smooth. The two voices together sounded like different colors mixing into a beautiful shade the world had never heard before. The audience lost all control. Some people jumped with joy, others screamed until their voices cracked, and many simply stared with open mouths, unable to process what they were witnessing. A fan in the front row covered her face with both hands, crying and laughing at the same time. They weren't watching a rivalry. They weren't watching competitors. They were watching two artists, two dreamers, two legends sharing a stage, not for fame or headlines, but for the love of music. As the brief duet reached its final note, Michael stepped back and gestured toward Prince with both hands, introducing him to the crowd without speaking a word. Prince lifted his guitar in a small salute, acknowledging the thunderous applause. For a full minute, the stadium felt like a living heartbeat, pulsing with claps, cheers, and pure emotion. Prince leaned toward Michael and said softly, "Time to give them back the show." Michael smiled and replied, "Thank you for being here tonight." Prince nodded. "My pleasure." With that, Prince gracefully walked back toward the curtain. Just before disappearing behind it, he turned, flashed one last smile at the crowd, and lifted his guitar slightly in farewell. The fans responded with a roar so loud it echoed throughout the stadium. Michael watched him leave, feeling a mix of admiration and joy. Then he turned back to the audience, ready to continue his show with renewed energy. The duet was only a few minutes long, but those minutes carried enough magic to last a lifetime. And every person in that stadium knew they had witnessed something special, something they would tell their children, friends, and grandchildren for years to come. When Prince disappeared behind the curtain, the echo of cheering still filled the stadium like rolling thunder. People were still shouting his name, some calling for him to come back, others simply standing in shock, unable to believe what they had just witnessed. The night felt different now, bigger, brighter, and heavier with excitement. It was as if a historic moment had opened a door that no one knew existed before. Michael stood at the center of the stage for a few seconds, allowing the crowd to release all the overflowing excitement inside them. He smiled, a true, warm smile that reached his eyes. He appreciated every scream, every cheer, every spark of energy bouncing across the massive stadium. It wasn't only appreciation for himself, it was appreciation for the surprise that had just blessed the night. He raised his hand gently and the crowd slowly calmed down, little by little, their voices softening like waves settling on the shore. Michael waited until the cheers faded just enough for the music to rise again. Then the band picked up the next beat, and Michael slid right into the next performance as if no interruption had occurred at all. But everyone knew the show had shifted. Fans were dancing harder, singing louder, smiling wider. Something inside them had awakened. They had seen two legends share a stage in perfect harmony. Even the musicians felt lifted, playing each note with more passion and joy. The dancers moved with extra fire in their steps, fueled by the memory of the moment that had just passed. Michael performed every song after the duet with a new kind of energy. His movements were sharper, his voice stronger, and his presence brighter. It felt as if the performance wasn't only a concert anymore, it had become a celebration of music, creativity, friendship, and the unexpected beauty that happens when two great artists cross paths. At the end of the show, when Michael finished his final number and stood at the edge of the stage, the stadium shook again with applause. People didn't want to leave. They waved, clapped, and shouted his name over and over. Some held their phones and cameras up high, hoping to capture even a final glimpse of him. Others simply stood in place, trying to soak in the final moments of a night that had given them a memory they would never forget. Michael bowed deeply, placing his hand on his heart. He felt overwhelmed with gratitude. Tonight had been more than a show. It had been a gift. As he walked off stage, the sounds of cheering still followed him down the hallway. He took a deep breath and allowed the feeling to settle inside him. His costume was slightly damp with sweat, his hair a little messy, but he didn't mind. He felt fulfilled. He felt proud. Most of all, he felt happy that the audience had experienced something truly magical. When he stepped into the backstage area, there were smiles everywhere. Crew members clapped for him, dancers hugged each other, and musicians high-fived with excitement. Everyone felt the same spark. Something incredible had happened, and they were all part of the moment that made history. Prince stood a short distance away, leaning casually against a tall speaker, his guitar resting by his side. He was calm, as always, but his eyes shone with a spark that revealed his excitement. Michael walked up to him, still catching his breath. "That was amazing," he said, smiling warmly. Prince nodded with a quiet smile of his own. "It felt right," he replied. "The energy out there, it was unbelievable." Michael laughed softly. "You made the night unforgettable." Prince shrugged modestly. "I just added a little flavor to your world." Michael shook his head. "More than that, much more." For a moment, they both fell silent, not out of awkwardness, but because they understood that words sometimes couldn't describe the full truth of an experience. They simply shared the moment, letting the calm settle around them. Prince crossed his arms lightly. "You know," he said, "people will talk about this for a long time." Michael nodded. "Maybe longer than we expect." Prince smiled. "Good, let them." They laughed together, the sound echoing softly in the busy hallway. The years of comparison, questions, and rumors seemed to melt away. Tonight, they weren't two stars being compared. They were simply two artists who had chosen to share a moment on stage, guided by respect and creativity. A few dancers passed by and waved excitedly at Prince. He waved back, amused by their enthusiasm. Someone from the lighting team asked Michael if he needed water, but he just smiled gratefully and said he was fine. As Prince prepared to leave, he lifted his guitar strap over his shoulder. "Thanks for letting me step into your world tonight," he said sincerely. Michael shook his head again, gently disagreeing. "It wasn't my world," he replied. "It was ours, just for a moment." Prince appreciated that more than he could express. He stepped forward, lightly clasped Michael's hand, and gave a nod full of warmth and respect. Then he turned and walked toward the back exit, disappearing slowly into the dim, quiet hallway. Michael watched him leave, feeling a mixture of joy and disbelief. He felt honored. He felt inspired. And most of all, he felt grateful for the unexpected, unplanned moment that had changed the night. As the crew packed up equipment and began their end-of-show routines, the conversations around them were filled with nothing but amazement. "Did you see them together? Did that really happen? It felt like a dream. I still can't believe it." Every person had a different version of the moment in their mind. Some talked about Prince's guitar. Others talked about Michael's dancing. Many couldn't stop describing the feeling they experienced when the two artists stood side by side. Everyone had their own perspective, and every perspective was full of excitement. Long after the audience left the seats, long after the lights went out, long after the musicians packed their instruments, the memory still floated in the air like shining dust. The news spread quickly. By the next morning, newspapers and radio stations around the world were talking about the surprise duet. It became the main headline everywhere. People who weren't at the concert wished they had been. Those who were there said it was the most unforgettable night of their lives. Some fans wrote long letters describing what they felt. Others called their friends in excitement, trying to explain the moment but failing to find the right words. Many simply replayed the memory in their minds, smiling every time they thought about it. The moment became a legend. In the years that followed, people still talked about that night. They talked about how Prince walked on stage unannounced. They talked about the musical back and forth between him and Michael. They talked about the harmony, the creativity, and the shared joy that lit up Wembley like 100 suns. Parents told their children about it. Friends told stories at gatherings. Music fans kept bringing it up whenever discussions about iconic concert moments began. Some called it the miracle duet. Others called it the night two stars became one. But most simply said it was magic. For Michael, the memory stayed close to his heart. Whenever he thought about that night, he remembered the laughter, the connection, and the music that flowed naturally between them. He remembered how the audience reacted, how they cheered with pure happiness, and how they became part of a moment much bigger than any of them expected. For Prince, the moment remained special too. He often thought about the way the crowd sounded, how it felt to step on stage without warning, and how easy it was to share the spotlight with someone who understood music the way he did. He didn't speak about it often, but when he did, he always smiled. The world eventually moved on to new shows, new songs, and new memories. But the duet stayed alive, kept safe in the hearts of everyone who either saw it or heard the stories. It became more than a performance, more than a surprise, more than a concert moment. It became a symbol of what can happen when two creative souls come together, not as rivals, but as artists who simply want to share something beautiful. And even years later, whenever people talked about the greatest moments in music history, the night Michael Jackson and Prince shared a stage in 1988 always found a place at the top of the list. The moment lasted only minutes, but its memory lived on, shining, inspiring, unforgettable.